Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords, and today I'm doing a video about a topic that I covered at least once before, but it's come back into the news, and that's ttrpg safety tools. So if you don't know what these are, they're a series of mandates that have been ever increasingly developed in more and more totalitarian ways by the wokeists invading our hobby to try to force gaming groups to follow certain protocols that are allegedly meant to be to protect the safety of players at the table. And the earliest of these, and still by far the most popular one, which I talked about in a video long ago, you can, if you really want to, you can go look it up in my videos somewhere in the past, at least a year ago, I think, probably more, is the X card. The X card is a card that if, in groups that use safety tools, if a player pulls out that card, then the game must immediately stop, and and whatever's going on in the game must be stopped, right? So I don't know. For example, let's pick a stupid example. Someone is phobic of halflings, and there's a scene where the party encounters some halflings. He could pull out the X card, or she, or Zur, or they could pull out the X card. Let's face it, it's probably one of the latter three. And then the game would have to stop immediately, and the DM would have to change the scene, right? And in theory, the person with the card could explain what they don't want in the scene. So they don't want halflings, so you have to change it to kobolds or something else. Or the player could choose to say nothing. And according to the regulations in safety tools, it is not appropriate, because we're dealing with people with trauma here, right? It's not appropriate to question the use of the card, or even, why it's being used, to make any kind of questioning at all of the person who utilizes the X card, right? With the exception that the game master can state that he's not sure where to pick up and ask the player how to proceed, right? So that's just one of many of these safety tools. There are other increasingly ridiculous ones that have come along afterwards, like a little card that you can signal to another player to ask if they're okay, and the player can confirm by raising a card saying, yes, I'm okay, and stuff like that, right? And other cards, right, that immediately stop play for some concern out of the mental well-being and emotional trauma of the players. And this would all seem like just patently ridiculous, right? Except that for a long time now, there have been organized play and convention situations where groups demand this, right? So it's not just a problem if you would happen to find a gaming group that would decide to take up with this nonsense. It's a problem because the wokeists are trying to make them mandatory in any situation that they can control. And the reason, in fact, that it's gotten back into the news now, I believe, has to do with the fact that we're at the peak convention season in North America. Gen Con is happening and all of that. And there's this, again, a big push to make these rules mandatory for anyone who is DMing or playing in a convention. And, in fact, there are some conventions that have announced that they're going to give away X cards to everybody who comes to the convention when they come through the door, right? So this means it's not optional to use them or not at your table, right? Because imagine what would happen if you're DMing at a convention. I don't know if GaryCon is doing this. They might, because GaryCon has become very woke lately too, right? But I'm sure in Gen Con, for example, this would be the case, right? So you're DMing at your table. You don't believe in safety tools. You don't bring that up or anything, and you're playing, and then suddenly a player pulls out the X card, right? Let's guess what would happen. Who would be in trouble if the DM refuses to acknowledge the existence of the X card, or says we're not going to use it outright? Who's going to get kicked out of that convention? the player that disrupted the group, or the DM that refused to recognize the trauma of this poor person. I think it's pretty obvious, right? And of course, the wokists always have a two-sided dialogue about this sort of thing, right? They're speaking from both sides of their mouth, because whenever you complain about the X card, they say, well, if you don't like it, you just don't have to use it, right? We're not trying to force anyone to use it, right? Except that they are trying to force people to use it at conventions and in organized play. And also, lately, they've been saying, in this latest round, there have been a number of wokists who have said outright, this is a requirement, it's mandatory, right? And that have said that people who don't do this are basically evil and should be drummed out of the hobby, right? So there's someone who said, let me be clear, if there's no safety tools at your table, I can only assume you don't care about possibly hurting the people at your table, right? So like this is nonsense, right? Anyone who can be hurt by a normal D&D session doesn't belong in the hobby. They probably belong in some kind of an institution, right? This is an attempt to overthrow in the game, not just the DM, because I think I talked about that in the last video, but when you think about it more clearly, what this is an attempt to overthrow normativity, right? To overthrow normal behaviors. Because, in a normal situation, let's say you're playing an RPG, and let's say that sincerely there's someone that has a real problem with something that's going on, they can talk about it, right? And they can discuss it. That's within the accepted boundaries of a thing, right? If there's a scene or something that you are either offended by or that triggers some kind of trauma in you or something, you can bring it up in a normal conversation like normal people do. Right. But the thing is that becomes a social negotiation with the DM and with the rest of the group, where we hope the rules of good manners apply. But that's not what they want. What they want is to create a situation where basically the person that is offended has all the power and gets to hold the entire group hostage and does not have to explain themselves, right? They just get to automatically dominate the situation so that any opportunity to work out a resolution other than them getting exactly what they want is subverted. So that's one very important reason not to embrace safety tools, right? And the other thing is that just like any typical postmodernist critical theory type idea, the trick that they learned from Occult and Derrida and company is that you're debating them on their grounds. And the way that they do that is by control, not just of the narrative, but by control of the semantic assumptions of an argument. So the argument of safety tools is that these tools are necessary. They keep people safe. They protect them from the situation. They therefore need to be obligatory because it's about caring about people and things like that. But the semantic assumption that is hidden within that, the thing that you immediately kind of accept if you start to argue about that and to try to negotiate with their surface level argument, the underlying assumption is one that they've often said, which is that the entire D&D hobby is toxic and that regular gamers are evil and horrible, right? That is what the assumption is there. That the reason you need to have these tools is because you're all horrible people and you would not be trusted. You cannot be trusted to be reasonable, so other people can't be reasonable with you. So they have to have something that they can force you into obedience. That this justifies, the adoption of these tools and techniques. The X card and a lot of these tools come from another sort of interest that undoubtedly a lot of these people have, they come from the culture of BDSM play, right? And I mentioned this in the previous video that in the culture of BDSM, they're used because people can be triggered by scenarios that are obviously much more emotionally and physically and sexually charged than playing a role-playing game. So it's a foreign import that has been hammered into the scenario, right? It's being used as a weapon for the extremist of the group to have the most power. And if you question it, you're labeled an abuser. But the interesting thing is that that's not really how it works in the BDSM or fetish scene, right? So because there, what would happen if someone uses, like a safe word or something like that, one of these safety tools in BDSM? The first thing that happens, obviously, is that scene immediately, that whatever they're doing, whatever play is going on there, immediately stops, right? And then there's an opportunity to understand what went wrong, right? There's discussion and things like that happen, right? Because obviously there's somebody there are people, two or more, that are into what was going on, but then something went wrong, and it's used to kind of work things out. It's not used, or the person who did it said, no, I'm sorry, this is just not working for me, and they leave, right? But what it's not meant to do is to create a situation where the person who uses the safe word suddenly gets to take control of everything that's happening and force everyone else to go along with them, right? So there's a lot of issues about that, right? The first is that the origins of these safety tools coming out of BDSM fetish ideas is kind of a case of people who are not normative, at the very least, right? Of people that are by definition alternative, let's say, to be nice, projecting those abnormalities on what is actually a fairly normative hobby, right? The idea that, like in most gaming groups, with a few notable exceptions, but that stand out as being weird, and as most gamers looking askance at those, most gaming groups in their gameplay are not going to be doing anything that's rated X, right? Almost every gaming group I've ever seen is rated somewhere in the spectrum between PG and rated R. And the rated R is usually for violence, right? It's not for any kind of risque sort of, kinky stuff or something like that, right? Even groups that have like campaigns that feature, let's say, a lot of romance, or that might feature, Game of Thrones type of stuff, will typically fade to black at the moment that there's anything racy that actually happens, right? And then you just, you skip that part, right? So this is like a completely ridiculous introduction of a concept into the hobby that has no place there, right? And in fact, you could argue that one of the reasons that these people want to have things like these safety tools in there is not to prevent, but rather to encourage more perverse styles of play, because I'm sure that they would find that liberating in some way. I don't know. I've never, I'm a pipe smoker, but I don't really want to mix pipe smoking with role playing, and, or other things. I guess I do mix history with role playing, right? As you can see from products like Sword and Caravan, or the Old School Companion, the Old School Companion 2 in this case. But there's some things. It's like, I always think of that sort of stuff, like the idea, like let's say if you're into BDSM and mixing that with like playing a regular D&D session, it just makes me think of that Seinfeld episode where George Costanza tries to mix sex and eating at the same time, right? And it just doesn't work, and it ruins both things. I would imagine, So anyway, if you're the argument on the one hand, because again, they're going to use a couple of different arguments to try to explain why you need these safety tools. And one of them, it's never going to be because we want to control you, or because, we're a bunch of BDSM fetishists, right? What it is going to be is stuff like, well, there's people that are severely traumatized, and so we need to do this for them, right? Well, the fact is, if you're so mentally unstable to the point that you can't handle basic normal social interactions with human beings, then you shouldn't be playing D&D. And nobody else is required to change the entire hobby to enable your mental illness. It's if someone's at the risk of having an emotional or mental collapse from something that everybody else at the table would consider normal, that in the first place they shouldn't be playing D&D. Second, not getting to play D&D is like the least of their problems, right? And third, normal people shouldn't act as enablers for an incapacity that has come as a result of people's mental issues, right? That it's literally asking everyone to be an enabler for you rather than than you getting the help you need. So it's not in any way a healthy thing for anybody involved, including the person doing that. Now, when you argue that, what you're going to hear suddenly is they're going to switch around and say, oh, no, I never meant that. I meant that, there are people that are going to be uncomfortable with certain scenarios, right? And that's what it is, that you need to allow it for people who are expressing discomfort at a situation, but that's a bit of a ridiculous argument too, right? Because the two scenarios that you're presenting us with, the choices that you expect us to make, or that you're going to try to argue from both sides, is that either X cards and other safety tools are necessary because someone is profoundly traumatized, in which case they really shouldn't be playing, or that X cards are necessary because people are just uncomfortable. And if that's true, if the X card is not meant for like deeply mentally traumatized people, the alternative is really that it's just made for hyper controlling assholes who think that if they're even mildly uncomfortable, they should immediately get veto power over what everyone else at the D&D table is allowed to enjoy. And that's what ends up happening, right? Because if you've got this scenario, and that's much more common actually. That's kind of where the truth comes out, right? Because you're going to have relatively few people who have like profound mental illness that could cause them to like go catatonic or freak out or something like that about something that's happening in a role-playing game, right? Unless they're like phobic of weird-looking dice. But most people who would use the X card are at best people who disapprove or feel uncomfortable or are offended by something that happens in a scene. And so what it means is that if everybody at the table has an X card, that table is actually going to end up being controlled by the most extreme ideologue or by the most unstable psychotic at the table, right? Because that's the person that's going to use it. And suddenly the entire table is being held hostage by that person who can demand to change the gameplay any way they want or to cancel the gameplay that is currently happening. And everybody else is obliged to obey that, or they're going to be called, a bigot and be expelled or something like that. This is not good faith behavior, right? And the purpose of the X card, you could describe it. The X card is a quiet tantrum, right? But it's also a tantrum you're not allowed to counter. You're not allowed to object to. You're just obliged to obey that quiet tantrum that's happening. And it's the opposite of what normal play is. Now you can be saying, oh, well, then what happens? Should someone just be uncomfortable? Should someone just have to grin and bear it at that table? Well, no. There's, like I said, there's two good options. One is you can talk like a human being to the rest of the party, where your opinion can be heard, but you don't get to dominate the entire rest of the party. Like you're not you don't get to have a massive ego of believing that everybody else should have to bend to your will automatically, right? But you can talk about it and appeal to people's better natures if there's something that's really actually bothering you, and maybe other people will agree. You never know, right? It might happen. Instead of having to be, this terrorist, basically, right? Like this hostage taker that will be able to get their way without any dissent, right? It's the ultimate infantile perspective that, wokeists love. They love that idea because obviously the person's going to use the X card for soul, believes in it, right? They're part of the wokist totalitarian agenda, right? And so then it's something that means at every table, the person that is most pro-wokist an ideology will get to control what happens at that table like a political commissar. And since you can't question why they make the X card call, there's nothing you can do to stop them except not allow the X card, right? Or refuse to participate. The other thing, though, that a person can do, the right that every single player at a table has, if they have irreconcilable differences with the rest of that table, is to stand up and walk away at any time, right? Every player, every gamer has the right to do that, to say, this isn't working for me, see you later, and walk away, right? And that is an absolute power that every player has. And if the DM doesn't want them to walk away, they got to compromise. If they don't want to compromise, then they have to accept that the person's going to walk away, because nobody can be forced to play in an RPG, and that's good, right? The problem is that's not what they want. That's not how it works for them, right? What they want is a situation where they don't have to walk away, and instead they can stop the game and keep stopping the game as much as they want to, including basically ending the game for all intents and purposes if they don't get what they want, right? The quiet tantrum. There you have it. That's their method. They want to force everyone else to let you have your way, right? And it's, forcing everyone to stop is just an unacceptable policy that utterly transforms the dynamic of RPG play. The most powerful person isn't the DM at the table, it's the person who's willing to use the X card in the most abusive way possible. So even if there are like more than one people using the X card, the one that has all the real power is the one that's willing to go to the furthest extreme. And you can see how that destroys normative society, which is their goal, right? It's like, it's a well-stated goal of the woke anti-Western left to destabilize everything normative about our society. And in fact, gamers are mostly normal people, and they want to have mostly normal games, and that's something to fight and defend. So if you find yourself encountering the X card, I would say put an X card at the X card. That is not acceptable at the table. And if you find yourself in a scenario where there's a gaming convention, if you know in advance that a gaming convention is going to use safety tools, then don't go to that convention. That's a convention that is set up to impose an agenda on our game, on our hobby. And the right way to vet your D&D table is basically to tell people, this is a normal D&D game. It'll have heroes fighting monsters. It won't have any like explicit sex scenes or something like that. If you can't handle a normal D&D game like an adult, then get out of my table. Maybe check into some kind of mental health, service, because you obviously, that's what you need to do. Now, if you find that you're at a con and you already paid your money, you're in there, and then suddenly everybody is demanding the use of the X card. Well, I wouldn't normally recommend this, right? Because the point is that if everybody else at the table actually wants to use this, maybe you've accidentally stumbled into some like super woke convention. Well, then I don't know. You're going to have to live with it, right? But really, I know what I would do in a scenario like that, right? If no one's allowed to question the use of an X card, then you might as well hit the X card on anything you don't like, anything that they're pushing in there, right? So like as soon as in the session you have some character starts talking about their sexual orientation choices, lift the X card, right? Someone starts describing their pronouns, lift the X card, right? Someone's doing a whole scene in the adventure about how you guys are exploring the vibrant ethnic culture of a night market. X card, just keep on X carding until you get to kill some orcs or something, and why not? I mean, because it's a weapon of ideological warfare, right? And if they really demand that it be there, then use it against them. Give that some thought. But really, don't put yourself in a situation where you're ever forced to do that, right? And make sure you know what type of cons you're going to, and make sure that you don't buy into the bullshit arguments that they're using to try to enforce this disruption of normal gaming culture into the hobby, right? It doesn't mean you have to be an asshole to people. And obviously, if someone's got issues with something in play, you should hear them out. But not if the first thing they do is raise an X card. Say, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that. But if there's something bothering you, then tell me what it is, and we'll see if we can do something about that, or if it would be better for you to leave the table. Because that's the real answer. That's the real way that you should respond to a situation like that. Anyways, that's it for today's video. If you like this video, please subscribe and share the video anywhere you think people will find this useful instruction, and anywhere where you think it'll piss people off too, for that matter. Like the video, and check out all my other videos if you haven't yet. And if you want to support me, the best way to support me is to pick up my products, which I promise are not woke or anti-woke or political in any way. What they are is really great normal gaming. So check out stuff like Sword and Caravan. Sword and Caravan is doing incredibly well, by the way. I was really shocked. Start of the month, the sales in the second month were actually higher. The first month sales were good, right? The second one are normally it dips a little in the second month compared to the first, but actually they went up, a little. So that's really remarkable. It's doing really, really well, and you should find out what all the fuss is about. I mean, it's had nothing but gushing reviews. Medieval adventures and the Third Crusade and the Silk Road, and it's all authentic cultural stuff that is makes for incredible gaming. Old School Companion 2, 26 different adventures that you can use in any OSR game that are all based on authentic, medieval sources of medieval history and myth and legend and weird stuff and all kinds of exciting stuff by all kind of variant levels. Definitely better than any of the books full of adventures that Wizards of the Coast has put out recently. The Invisible College, modern day occult conspiracy role playing with authentic magical stuff in there, and all my other products too. The RPG Pundit Presents series, Lion and Dragon, platinum bestseller, Dark Albion, Cults of Chaos, all of that stuff. Check them out. The RPG Pundit Presents series are a PDF series, and they cost between 99 cents to $4.99 a piece, and there's 107 of them already. So you're bound to find something you like, and it's like you're buying me a coffee or maybe a Kit Kat or something, but you're actually getting something for yourself, right? Because I like that. Now, if you don't want to buy any of my books, but you still want to support me, I guess you could support me on Patreon, right? But I don't put anything on the Patreon. If you want content, I don't do this, special content only for subscribers or something like that. No, my content comes out in books or PDFs, and you can pick them up, and they're going to have stuff that you're going to find useful, right? And gameable, and they're for gamers. So you can actually use them. They're not pretty books full of, they're very pretty books, but they're not books that are just to focus on, ideological indoctrination or something like that, or to be like full of stuff that makes it really obvious when you read it that it wasn't actually written by an actual gamer, or that it's just meant for people to feel special about while they read it, but not to ever actually use it. Terrible products. These are real gamers products, so check them out. And yeah, that's it for today. Currently smoking nothing because I'm about to cook some supper. We'll see you all later.